The founding and early consolidation of the Tudor Dynasty, 1485 to 1509, marks the beginning of a new era for England under the rule of Henry VII. His victory at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, where he defeated Richard III, ended the protracted Wars of the Roses between the houses of Lancaster and York. This triumph not only established the Tudor dynasty but also symbolized the end of decades of bloody civil strife. Henry VII's first priority was to solidify his claim to the throne. Although he had a tenuous link to the Lancastrian line, he strengthened his position by marrying Elizabeth of York, effectively uniting the warring houses and symbolically ending the rivalry. This marriage produced heirs, including Henry VIII, ensuring the continuity of the Tudor line and strengthening Henry's legitimacy. Henry worked diligently to stabilize England and consolidate his power through three main strategies. Strengthening royal authority, Henry focused on weakening the influence of the nobility, who had grown too powerful during the Wars of the Roses. By curbing their privileges and establishing the Court of Star Chamber to control over mighty subjects, he reinforced royal authority. This court allowed him to act against nobles who posed threats, reducing their capacity for rebellion. Financial stability, known for his cautious and meticulous approach to finances, Henry increased royal income through careful management, feudal dues, and efficient tax policies. He also revived certain medieval tax practices to ensure the crown had a steady income, creating a more secure economic foundation for his reign. Foreign alliances, Henry sought to secure England's place in Europe through strategic marriages and alliances. His daughter, Margaret Tudor, married James IV of Scotland, establishing a long-term peace between England and Scotland, while his son, Arthur, married Catherine of Aragon to create an alliance with Spain. Although Arthur's early death interrupted these plans, his alliance-building established England as a stable, diplomatically engaged state. Henry VII's efforts to consolidate his power laid the groundwork for a strong Tudor state and enabled his successors, especially Henry VIII, to inherit a stable and prosperous kingdom. This period was marked by Henry's cautious, deliberate policies aimed at restoring order and elevating the monarchy to a position of undisputed authority. The reign of Henry VII, 1485 to 1509, marked the beginning of the Tudor dynasty and was characterized by a strategic approach to governance that prioritized stability, financial security, and centralized power. His rule brought peace and order after the turbulence of the Wars of the Roses, with a focus on consolidating the monarchy's authority and securing his position as king. Battle of Bosworth, Henry VII's ascent to the throne came after his decisive victory at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, where he defeated Richard III. This win effectively ended the Wars of the Roses and the Plantagenet line, bringing relative peace to England. Marriage to Elizabeth of York. To further secure his claim, Henry married Elizabeth of York, uniting the warring houses of Lancaster and York. This marriage strengthened his legitimacy and helped to garner broader support, symbolizing the end of factional conflicts. Control over nobility. Henry VII worked to limit the influence of the nobility, who had amassed considerable power during the previous civil conflicts. He implemented policies to reduce their autonomy, such as requiring nobles to swear loyalty and limiting their ability to maintain private armies. The establishment of the Court of Star Chamber provided a judicial tool to try and punish those who challenged his rule. Building a loyal administration, Henry carefully selected trusted advisors and administrators, often from the lower gentry, to manage his affairs. This helped to centralize authority around the crown and ensured that his officials were loyal and dependent on his favor. Improving royal finances, Henry VII was known for his careful management of the treasury. By increasing royal income through taxes, fines, and enforcing feudal dues, he made the crown financially independent and reduced the need to rely on Parliament for funding. Promoting trade, Henry pursued an economic policy that encouraged trade, particularly with the Netherlands, England's main trading partner for wool. He established several trade agreements, including the Treaty of Medina del Campo with Spain, which improved economic relations and strengthened alliances. Strategic marriages. Henry was a keen diplomat and pursued foreign alliances through strategic marriages. His eldest son, Arthur, married Catherine of Aragon, cementing an alliance with Spain. Although Arthur's death disrupted this plan, Henry later arranged for Catherine to marry his second son, Henry VIII, thus maintaining the alliance. Maintaining peace, Henry avoided costly wars that would drain the treasury. His policies were focused on diplomacy and peaceful resolutions, ensuring that England remained largely uninvolved in European conflicts during his reign. Henry VII's reign saw several challenges from pretenders, including Lambert Simnel and Perkin Warbeck, who claimed to be Yorkist heirs with rights to the throne. Henry effectively handled these threats by capturing and executing Warbeck and pardoning Simnel, who was given a menial job in the royal kitchens. These actions demonstrated Henry's pragmatism and preference for control over brute force. Henry VII successfully established the Tudor dynasty as a legitimate, stable ruling house, leaving a strong, wealthy state for his successor, Henry VIII. His financial prudence, focus on peace, and consolidation of monarchical authority laid the groundwork for England's future strength and prosperity. Despite his reputation for being somewhat austere and frugal, his policies helped lift England out of decades of civil war, bringing peace, financial stability, and a stronger central government. This foundation allowed the Tudors to transform England into a significant European power in the decades that followed. The reign of Henry VIII, 1509 to 1547, was one of the most transformative in English history, marked by political, religious, and social upheaval that permanently altered the nation's course. Henry VIII ascended to the throne as a young and charismatic monarch, admired for his athleticism, intelligence, and cultural interests. Early in his reign, he was a staunch defender of the Catholic faith, famously earning the title Defender of the Faith from Pope Leo X for his writings against Protestantism. However, his desire for a male heir would soon lead to a historic break from the Catholic Church and a drastic reformation of religious life in England. Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon, his brother's widow, initially appeared fruitful but ultimately failed to produce a surviving male heir, leaving only one daughter, Mary. Desperate for a male successor, Henry became fixated on Anne Boleyn, a court lady with whom he hoped to sire a son. However, the Pope refused to grant him an annulment from Catherine, leading Henry to take drastic measures. In 1534, he passed the Act of Supremacy, declaring himself the supreme head of the Church of England. This act severed English ties with the Catholic Church and marked the beginning of the English Reformation, a period of religious restructuring that transformed England from a Catholic nation into a Protestant one. The move not only granted him his divorce from Catherine but also allowed him to marry Anne Boleyn, though she would later fail to provide him with a male heir, producing only a daughter, Elizabeth. Following the break with Rome, Henry initiated sweeping religious changes. His dissolution of the monasteries, carried out between 1536 and 1541, closed hundreds of monasteries and religious institutions, seizing their wealth and land for the crown. This decision further consolidated his power and brought significant financial gain, though it displaced many monks, nuns, and religious workers, creating widespread social impact. While he stopped short of embracing all Protestant reforms, Henry instituted a Reformed Church of England that combined elements of Catholic tradition with Protestant beliefs. The Bible was translated into English, and services were conducted in English rather than Latin, making religious practices more accessible to the common people. However, Henry remained conservative in certain beliefs, punishing both radical Protestants and Catholics who opposed his reforms. Throughout his reign, Henry VIII demonstrated a complex personality that combined ruthlessness with a desire for legacy. His 6 marriages underscored his determination to secure a male heir, which finally occurred with the birth of his only legitimate son, Edward, by his 3rd wife, Jane Seymour. His other marriages often ended tragically, and Boleyn and his 5th wife, Catherine Howard, were executed, and his marriages to Anne of Cleves and Catherine Parr were marked by personal and political complications. Despite Henry's ruthless actions, his quest for stability and continuity resulted in the establishment of the Tudor dynasty's future. Henry's Reformation policies sparked unrest and resistance. The Pilgrimage of Grace, a Catholic-led rebellion in the north, protested his dissolution of monasteries and religious reforms. Though Henry suppressed the revolt with military force, it revealed the deep divisions his reforms had created within English society. He continued to enforce religious conformity through harsh measures, including the execution of prominent dissenters such as Sir Thomas More and John Fisher, who remained loyal to Catholicism and opposed his divorce from Catherine. The final years of Henry's reign saw his health deteriorate, with chronic leg ulcers and obesity marking a stark contrast to the athletic, energetic king of his youth. His focus shifted increasingly to maintaining power and stability, with policies aimed at defending England from external threats, particularly from France and Scotland. Henry's efforts to fortify England led to increased military spending, which drained much of the wealth gained from the monasteries, leaving financial strains for his successors. By the time of Henry's death in 1547, he had transformed England from a devout Catholic nation into a Protestant state with a centralized monarchy. The religious changes he set in motion would continue to shape the country's history for generations, affecting politics, culture, and the role of the monarchy. Henry VIII's reign remains a defining period in English history, as his actions brought about profound shifts in religious identity and established England as a powerful, centralized state under the Tudor monarchy. The reign of Edward VI, 1547 to 1553, was marked by significant religious reform and political experimentation as England moved firmly toward Protestantism. Edward, the only legitimate son of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour, became king at the age of 9, which meant that his rule was managed largely by a council of regents. His uncle, Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, initially held power as Lord Protector, making key decisions on behalf of the young king. Somerset's leadership aimed to establish Protestantism in England, as Edward was raised in the Protestant faith and shared a strong commitment to reform. Under Somerset's regency, the Church of England underwent profound changes. The English Book of Common Prayer, crafted by Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, was introduced in 1549 to standardize worship and replace Catholic rituals with Protestant practices. Services were conducted in English, images were removed from churches, and priests were permitted to marry, signaling a definitive shift from Catholic traditions. These changes faced resistance, especially in the more traditional Catholic regions, and sparked the Prayer Book Rebellion in Devon and Cornwall. Somerset's response was forceful, quelling the rebellion through military action, but the conflict exposed the deep divisions in English society regarding religious reform. Somerset's ambitious but controversial policies extended beyond religion. He implemented social reforms aimed at aiding the poor, tackling issues like land enclosures, which had displaced many peasants and created economic hardship. His efforts to protect the rights of the lower classes, however, angered the nobility, who benefited from the enclosures. His liberal stance and unpopular military ventures in Scotland intended to enforce a marriage alliance between Edward and Mary, Queen of Scots, drained England's treasury and weakened his support among the nobility and council members. In 1549, Somerset was overthrown by John Dudley, Earl of Warwick, who became the Duke of Northumberland and took control of the regency. Northumberland was less interested in social reforms and more focused on stabilizing England's finances and advancing Protestant reforms. He reversed many of Somerset's policies, sold crown lands to replenish the treasury, and maintained a strict approach to enforcing Protestantism. Under Northumberland, Protestantism became even more entrenched, and religious reforms continued. Cranmer's 1552 revision of the Book of Common Prayer further aligned the Church with Reformed Protestant beliefs, moving further from Catholic doctrine. During this period, Edward himself, though still young, showed a strong personal commitment to Protestantism, endorsing the theological changes. As Edward's health began to deteriorate in 1553, Northumberland orchestrated a plan to prevent the Catholic Mary Tudor, Edward's half-sister, from ascending the throne, fearing she would undo their Protestant reforms. He convinced Edward to support a succession plan favoring his Protestant cousin, Lady Jane Grey. When Edward died in July 1553, Lady Jane was declared queen, but her reign lasted only 9 days. Mary gathered support, and Jane was deposed as Mary ascended the throne, restoring Catholicism and reversing many of Edward's reforms. Edward VI's reign, though short, had a lasting impact. It firmly established Protestantism as the official religion of England, setting the stage for the religious conflicts that would continue under Mary and Elizabeth. Edward's reign demonstrated the challenges of religious reform, particularly when driven by a minority government, and underscored the deep divisions within England over faith and governance. Mary I's reign, 1553 to 1558, was marked by her fervent attempt to restore Catholicism in England after her Protestant half-brother, Edward VI, had advanced religious reforms. As the daughter of Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, Mary was deeply committed to the Catholic faith. Her accession was met with widespread support from both Catholics and those who saw her as the legitimate heir, especially after the controversial attempt by Edward's advisors to place Lady Jane Grey, a Protestant cousin, on the throne. Mary quickly overturned this plan, had Lady Jane imprisoned, and assumed power. Once in control, Mary moved swiftly to reverse the Protestant reforms instituted by Edward VI. She began by repealing Edward's religious laws, reinstating the traditional Latin Mass, and restoring papal authority over the English Church. With the help of her advisors, she passed legislation to formally reinstate Catholic doctrine, effectively undoing her father's and brother's religious changes. This restoration was accompanied by the return of several exiled Catholic bishops and priests, whom Mary appointed to high-ranking positions within the Church to enforce Catholic practices. Mary's marriage to Philip II of Spain was one of the defining moments of her reign. She saw this union as an alliance that would strengthen Catholic influence in England and support her efforts to re-establish Catholicism. However, the marriage was deeply unpopular among her subjects, who feared increased Spanish influence and the potential for England to become a satellite of Spain. Additionally, the marriage failed to produce an heir, which Mary had hoped would secure the Catholic future of the English throne. Mary's commitment to restoring Catholicism led to the persecution of Protestants, earning her the nickname Bloody Mary. Determined to root out heresy, she sanctioned the burning of around 280 Protestant leaders, including prominent figures like Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. These public executions were intended as a warning, but they had the unintended effect of creating Protestant martyrs and deepening resentment among her subjects. Her reign's severe response to Protestantism stirred resistance, and many Protestant reformers fled to safer regions in Europe, where they continued to spread their beliefs and writings. The economic conditions during Mary's reign were also challenging. A series of poor harvests led to food shortages, while epidemics, especially a severe influenza outbreak in 1557 to 1558, further devastated the population. Her involvement in a war against France, partly due to her marriage alliance with Philip, resulted in the loss of Calais, England's last possession on the European continent. This defeat was a significant blow to English pride and worsened her already declining popularity. Mary's reign ended in 1558 with her death from what is believed to have been ovarian cancer. Her attempts to restore Catholicism ultimately failed, as her successor, Elizabeth I, would re-establish Protestantism. Mary I's rule is often remembered for its intense religious persecution, her unpopular Spanish alliance, and the legacy of division it left between Catholics and Protestants in England. Despite her efforts, her reign underscored the resilience of Protestant sentiment and set the stage for Elizabeth I's religious settlement, which would shape England's future. The Elizabethan Era, 1558 to 1603, is widely considered a golden age in English history, marked by cultural flourishing, political stability, and economic growth. Queen Elizabeth I, the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, ascended the throne in 1558 after the tumultuous reigns of her half-siblings, Edward VI and Mary I. Elizabeth was a Protestant, but she pursued a moderate religious policy known as the Elizabethan religious settlement, which aimed to unite her subjects under a Reformed Church of England while avoiding extreme persecution of Catholics. This policy helped stabilize the nation and reduce the religious tensions that had marked previous reigns. One of the defining characteristics of the Elizabethan era was its cultural and artistic achievements. This period saw a flowering of English literature and drama, with writers such as William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Edmund Spenser producing works that would shape English literature for centuries. The theater, in particular, became immensely popular, with Shakespeare's plays capturing the complexities of the human experience and being performed for audiences of all social classes. Elizabeth herself was a great patron of the arts, and her court became a center of culture, attracting poets, musicians, and scholars. Elizabeth's reign was also notable for its emphasis on exploration and overseas expansion. English explorers like Sir Francis Drake, Sir Walter Raleigh, and Sir John Hawkins ventured to the New World and beyond, establishing trade routes and attempting to build a global empire. Drake's circumnavigation of the globe and Raleigh's expeditions to North America contributed to England's emergence as a seafaring power. These explorations fueled England's economy and laid the groundwork for future colonial ambitions, even as they strained relations with other European powers, especially Spain. The political landscape of the Elizabethan era was dominated by England's rivalry with Spain, culminating in the Spanish Armada of 1588. King Philip II of Spain sought to dethrone Elizabeth and restore Catholicism in England, leading to a massive naval invasion. However, the English navy, aided by fortuitous weather, defeated the Armada in a famous victory that boosted English pride and solidified Elizabeth's reputation as a strong and capable monarch. This triumph over Spain reinforced England's position as a rising European power and encouraged further maritime ambitions. Domestically, the Elizabethan era was a period of relative peace and prosperity, though it was not without challenges. The economy grew, especially in trade and manufacturing, but there were still widespread social inequalities. England's population increased rapidly, leading to urban overcrowding and poverty, especially in London. Elizabeth's government implemented the Poor Laws to address the plight of the destitute, marking an early attempt at social welfare. However, these laws often focused on controlling vagrancy rather than providing long-term solutions to poverty. Elizabeth herself remained unmarried and became known as the Virgin Queen, a symbol of strength and independence. Her choice to remain single allowed her to avoid foreign alliances that might compromise English sovereignty and control over her realm. Elizabeth's ability to maintain her authority in a male-dominated society earned her respect and admiration, and she skillfully managed her image through portraits and public appearances. By the end of Elizabeth's reign in 1603, England had become more unified and prosperous than at any time in recent memory. The Elizabethan era left a lasting legacy, with its cultural achievements, political stability, and expanding global influence. Elizabeth's rule is remembered as a period of consolidation and cultural splendor that set the stage for England's future as a dominant world power. The Spanish Armada of 1588 was a pivotal naval conflict between England and Spain, primarily driven by political, religious, and economic tensions. King Philip II of Spain, a staunch Catholic, sought to overthrow Protestant Queen Elizabeth I of England, restore Catholicism in England, and curb English influence and piracy. Elizabeth's support for Protestant rebels in the Spanish-controlled Netherlands, along with English privateers like Sir Francis Drake raiding Spanish ships and colonies, further escalated the rivalry between the two nations. Philip's plan involved assembling a massive fleet of 130 ships, known as the Armada, which would sail to the English Channel. From there, it would meet with the Duke of Parma's forces stationed in the Netherlands, and they would jointly invade England. The Armada was formidable, carrying around 30,000 men, including soldiers, sailors, and priests. However, the English Navy, under leaders such as Lord Charles Howard and Sir Francis Drake, was prepared to defend the realm. The Armada's journey was fraught with challenges from the start. Delays in departure, unfavorable weather, and logistical issues slowed its progress. When it finally reached the English Channel, the English Navy, with faster, more maneuverable ships, engaged in a series of harassing attacks. The English tactics were to avoid close combat with the larger Spanish galleons and instead rely on long-range cannon fire and swift movements. The English also launched fire ships, vessels set ablaze and sent toward the Armada, which scattered the Spanish fleet and disrupted their formation near Calais. The most decisive encounters occurred in the Battle of Gravelines, where English cannon fire inflicted significant damage on the Spanish fleet. The Armada, unable to regroup with Parma's forces and low on supplies, was forced to retreat northward around Scotland and Ireland to return to Spain. During this retreat, severe storms battered the Spanish ships, causing heavy losses. Many vessels wrecked along the coasts of Scotland and Ireland, and thousands of Spanish sailors perished. The defeat of the Spanish Armada was a turning point in European history. It marked the decline of Spain as the dominant maritime power and bolstered England's confidence as an emerging seafaring nation. For Elizabeth I, the victory solidified her position and enhanced her reputation as a strong Protestant leader, celebrated by her people as a defender of English sovereignty. While the Anglo-Spanish conflict continued for years, the failure of the Armada represented a symbolic and strategic victory for England, paving the way for its future naval dominance and colonial expansion. The end of the Tudor line came with the death of Queen Elizabeth I in 1603, marking the conclusion of a dynasty that had ruled England for 118 years. Elizabeth, known as the Virgin Queen, never married and left no direct heir. Her decision not to marry allowed her to maintain autonomy over her rule but created uncertainty regarding succession, as she had no children to carry on the Tudor line. Elizabeth's council sought a stable transition to avoid civil unrest, and by the later years of her reign, it was widely understood that James VI of Scotland, the son of her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, would be her successor. James was a Protestant, and his claim to the throne was strong through his descent from Margaret Tudor, Henry VIII's elder sister, which satisfied the political need for continuity and stability. When Elizabeth died on March 24, 1603, James was swiftly proclaimed King James I of England, uniting the English and Scottish crowns and initiating the Tudor Dynasty. This peaceful transition was significant as it ensured stability in England after the death of the last Tudor monarch. The end of the Tudor dynasty symbolized the close of an era marked by religious transformation, exploration, and the strengthening of the English monarchy. The Tudors had overseen the Reformation, the consolidation of royal power, and England's emergence as a prominent European state. The legacy of the Tudor dynasty, particularly through figures like Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, left a lasting impact on English culture, politics, and national identity, setting the stage for the Stuart period and the eventual unification of England and Scotland.